Amen.
Okay. Okay, today we're on Hebrews chapter 7. And the most prominent figure here is the introduction of Melchizedek. The word Melchizedek means king of righteousness. Melech in Hebrew means king, and Tzedek is the word for righteousness. And this fellow was both king and priest. He had a dual office. He was king of Salem. Salem was the name of Jerusalem. And Salem means peace. He's the king of peace. So you can see how he can be a type of Christ, because Jesus is the righteous king and he is the prince of peace. And Melchizedek was a high priest, or was a priest of the Most High God. He's mentioned in 3 different places in the Bible. The first time we encounter Melchizedek is in the book of Genesis, chapter 14, verse 18. There, we're told that there were 4 city kings. Those kings did not rule over countries. They did not rule over vast area. There were kings over tiny cities. In the Jordan Valley, there were some cities. One of them was Gomorrah, by the way. And every city, though tiny, had a king. So 4 kings of 4 cities form a coalition, and they attack Lot, the nephew of Abraham. They take him captive. Not only him, but also they capture his servants, the members of his family, and all his livestock, all the means of his livelihood. Now, when Abraham hears this, he arms 318 of his servants. So he was a rich man. He had 318 servants. He armed them, and he pursued these 4 kings, engaged them in battle, defeated them, rescued Lot and the members of his family. Now, why did Abraham do this? In Hebrew culture, when somebody was taken a prisoner, his next of kin was duty bound to rescue him. And the next of kin was called Goel. Goel. You remember in the book of Ruth, Boaz was the Goel of Ruth. In Job, we're told, I know that my Redeemer lives, and though worms destroy this body, in a new flesh will I see God. The hope of the resurrection and eternal life is there in Job chapter 19. But there it says, I know my Redeemer lives. The word for Redeemer is Goel. The Hebrew word there is Goel. So it means when we were captured by sin, when we became captives of sin, our next of kin, Jesus Christ, who is called our elder brother, rescued us. Did you get the idea? So Abraham rescues his nephew. Then he meets Melchizedek. All of a sudden, Melchizedek appeared on the scene, and he offered Abraham bread and wine. The Genesis narrative, Genesis chapter 14. Now, there are some Christians, mainly Roman Catholics, who see here a reference to the communion sacrament. But such an assumption is incorrect. Do you know why? Melchizedek did not consecrate the bread and the wine to make them to be the representation of Jesus' broken body and his shed blood. he did not consecrate the bread and the wine. It was to strengthen Abraham physically, who had just returned from a fierce and exhaustive battle. Okay. Psalm 110 verse 4, where God confirms through an oath that he will not change his mind, that Christ is a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Now, in Old Testament times, the priesthood was confined to one tribe, the Levites. If somebody wanted to be a priest, he had to prove that he was directly descended from Aaron. Aaron was the brother of Moses. He was the first Jewish high priest, and he belonged to the tribe of Levi. So only members of the tribe of Levi could become priests in Old Testament times. Jesus did not belong to the tribe of Levi. He belonged to the tribe of Judah. And so according to the law, he could not become a priest. Jesus could not be a priest after the order of Aaron or after the Levitical order, but he is a priest according to the order of Melchizedek. So Melchizedek, by the way, he was not Jewish. We can't say for sure what nationality he belonged to. He was a Semite for sure, but he was not Jewish. And Abraham, when he meets Melchizedek, acknowledges his position because he pays him tithe. Abraham tithes the booty of the war, the spoils of war. Notice Abraham did not pay tithe on everything he owned. He paid tithe on the war booty, on the spoils of war that he had received. And this was a concept ingrained in the minds of the Jews, that if they went to war and defeated their enemy, they possessed all the belongings of their enemy. They had to pay tithe on the spoils of war so that the rest could legitimately belong to them. So Abraham pays tithe to Melchizedek. Now, the author of the Hebrews says the payer of the tithe is inferior to the receiver. The one who collects the tithe is superior to the one who pays it. And Abraham not only paid tithe to Melchizedek, he also, Melchizedek blessed him. He gave him a priestly blessing. And then we're told the one who blesses is superior to the one who is blessed. The blessed is inferior to the one who does the blessing. So here we're told Melchizedek was superior to Abraham on two counts, because Abraham paid tithe to Melchizedek, thus he acknowledges superiority, and then he allowed Melchizedek to bless him. The one who blesses is superior to the one who receives the blessing. So Melchizedek was superior to Abraham. And the last mention of Melchizedek is in the book of the Epistle to the Hebrews. We met him in chapter 6. There he is referred to just passingly, but he figures prominently in Hebrews chapter 7 as a high priest of a different order. He's a high priest not according to the Levitical order, but according to a better order. Okay. So I give you this information as an introduction, because now as we go through the epistle, you'll find that I've already answered most of the questions that are involved here. My opening 3 paragraphs kind of give you a bird's eye view of the whole content of chapter 7. Okay, let's start with verse 1 and 2. This Melchizedek was king of Salem, he was king of Jerusalem, and priest of God, of the Most High God. He met Abraham returning from the defeat of the kings and blessed him. And Abraham gave him 1/10 of everything. First, his name means king of righteousness, then also king of Salem means king of peace. Now, I believe we already gave enough information about this verse. There is no need to repeat it. He was king over a city, and he was a priest of the Most High God. He was a priest even though he did not belong to the tribe of Levi, even though he was not Jewish. He was a Gentile. Okay, so let's go to verse 3. Without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life, like the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Now, this has been the subject of intense debate among Christian theologians. Here we're told Melchizedek had no father, no mother, no genealogy. This means that his patronage is unknown. We don't know who his parents were. Remember, under the Old Testament, to be a priest, a person had to show his family tree. He had to show his genealogy, proving that he was directly descended from Aaron. But this one, Melchizedek priesthood was not based on ancestry. It was based on a decree issued by God. So now some people say he was a manifestation of Christ, because he were told he has no mother, no father, no beginning of days, no end of life, and no genealogy. That's not a true statement, because whatever conclusion you come to must harmonize with everything mentioned in the context. Here we're told Melchizedek was made like Christ. He wasn't Christ. Melchizedek was not Christ. He was made like Christ. In what way? He was both king and priest. And Jesus was king and priest at the same time. In the Old Testament times, no one from the tribe of Judah functioned as a priest. Jesus was from the tribe of Judah. So no one from the tribe of Judah functioned as a priest. So how could Jesus be a high priest when he did not belong to the tribe of Judah, to the tribe of Levi? Because he was a priest after the order of Melchizedek, not after the Levitical order. Okay. So it just says that this means that he had his parents are unknown. We don't know who his parents were. And in the Bible, there are prophets whose parents we didn't know, like Elijah and Daniel. We don't know who their parents were, but we don't question their existence. Okay. So let's go to verse 4. Just think how great he was, meaning Melchizedek. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him 1/10 of the plunder. Here, plunder is not a good word. Would say he gave him 1/10 of the spoils. Now the law requires the descendants of Levi who become priests to collect 1/10 from the people. That's their brothers, even though their brothers are descended from Abraham. This man, however, Melchizedek, did not trace his descent from Levi, yet he collected a tenth from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. And without doubt, the lesser person is blessed. The lesser person is blessed by the greater. In the one case, the tenth is collected by men who die, but in other case by him who is declared to be living. One might even say that Levi, who collects the tenth, paid the tenth through Abraham, because when Melchizedek met Abraham, Levi was still in the body of his ancestor. This last point is very interesting, but it reflects Jewish thought. Here we're told that even Levi paid tithe to Melchizedek through Abraham. How could this be? Because Levi did not exist when Abraham lived. A Jew, this would not be a problem for a Jew. A Jew would tell you that Levi, although did not exist physically at that time, although Levi was not born, he existed in the sperm of Abraham. So
The DNA.
he existed in the body of Abraham, but the Greek says in the sperm of Abraham. So in other words, before I was born, I existed in the sperm of my father and in the sperm of my grandfathers. This thought is foreign to us, but it's very common among the Jews. So a Jew is never surprised by this. This doesn't cause a Jew to say, how could this be? Because he knows it's part of their culture, it's part of their religious beliefs and reasoning. So we already said how Abraham acknowledged Melchizedek's superiority because he paid him tithe and allowed Melchizedek to bless him. All right, well, let's go to 11. If perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, why was there still need for another priest to come, one in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Aaron? For when there is a change of the priesthood, there must also be a change of the law. This verse is very important. Whenever the priesthood changes, the law is changed. Now, here is the crux of the matter, verse 11. Perfection could not be attained through the observance of the law. The law did not make anyone perfect. Because if the law made people perfect, it would be useless and meaningless to speak of another priesthood and another high priest. So in other words, the first priesthood, the Levitical priesthood, was incomplete or deficient in the sense it could not make people perfect. Perfection could not be attained by keeping the law. The Jewish rabbis have written that if the nation of Israel, if the whole nation of Israel kept the law perfectly for just one day, the Messiah would come. But the Messiah hasn't come in their thinking because the Jewish nation has failed to keep the entire law perfectly for even one day. So this is a tacit admission on the part of the Jews that they could not keep the law perfectly, not even for one day. So because the Levitical priesthood was deficient, could not make people perfect, the need arose for another priesthood, for another priest. the priesthood of Melchizedek. All right, now, and when the priesthood changes, the law also changes. You know, if you go to Leviticus, the book of Leviticus has all the rules and regulations regarding the priests, their duties, how they perform their ministries, what duties they do during Passover or Pentecost, during the 7 annual feasts. Since our high priest, Jesus Christ, lives forever, there's no need for the law of priestly succession. The law of priestly succession is no longer needed, because the Levitical priests were mortal, they died. They did not stay in office permanently. So after they died, they had to choose another one. There was a law of priestly succession. But in our case, there is no such law of priestly succession because our high priest lives forever. The Catholics and the Orthodox Christians make a big deal out of this. They say they have apostolic succession and the Protestants don't. How? Well, they say their priests were ordained by other priests, and those priests were ordained by the other priests. And they go back to the apostles. They say the first Catholic priests were ordained by the apostles. And that succession was transferred to the present day. So when a Catholic bishop ordains a priest, he passes on the apostolic succession to the newly ordained priest. The Greek Orthodox also believe the same thing in this regard. But our high priest lives forever. And so the law of priestly succession is no longer necessary. Okay. 13. He of whom these things are said belonged to a different tribe, and no one from that tribe has ever served at the altar. Meaning Jesus did not belong to the tribe of Levi, he belonged to the tribe of Judah, and no one from the tribe of Judah ever served at the altar as a priest. For it's clear that our Lord descended from Judah, and in regard to that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. And what we have said is even more clear if another priest like Melchizedek appears. Some who has become a priest, not on the basis of regulation regarding his ancestry, but on the basis of the power and an indestructible life. Now, Jesus lives forever. He has indestructible life, whereas the Levitical priests, all of them died. There's another point. The Levitical priests and the people whom they represented continually violated the law. And so the law did not help them. The Jews today venerate the law, the Torah, the law, they venerate it, speak highly of it, but it's useless because it never made them perfect. It never helped them attain perfection. Okay. Now here you have a quotation from Psalm 110, verse 4. You are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. This is God who says that. In Psalm 110, verse 4, God confirms through an oath that he will not change his mind and that Jesus Christ has been ordained as a priest forever, as a high priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek, not after the Levitical order. Okay. 18, the former regulation is set aside because it was weak and useless. For the law made nothing perfect, that's a repetition, and a better hope is introduced by which we draw near to God. So here the writer says, it makes no sense to give up the better for the worse. The better is the high priesthood of Christ, and the worse is to go back to the Levitical priesthood. So it makes no sense to give the better for the worse. It makes no sense to accept the incomplete and refuse the complete. Okay. The whole point is this, that the law and the Levitical priesthood were of temporary duration. They were not meant to last forever. They were temporary, they were transient, and they were replaced and superseded by the new order. Did you get me? So that's a very important point that the author of Hebrews makes. Verse 20, and it was not without an oath. Others became priests without any oath, but Christ became a priest with an oath when God said, the Lord has sworn and he will not change his mind, you are a priest forever. The Levitical priests, when they were ordained, did not take an oath. But Christ, when he was appointed high priest, his office was confirmed by a divine oath. Okay. Now, verse 22 has an important word. Because of this oath, Jesus has become the surety of a better covenant. The word surety means guarantee. Jesus is the guarantor of our salvation. A very, very important point. This verse is very important. So in some Bibles it says that Jesus became our surety, S-U-R-E-T-Y. Surety means guarantor. Jesus is the one who guarantees our salvation. Now, there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office. But because Jesus lives forever, he's a permanent priest. His priesthood is permanent. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. The Levitical priests did not stay in office forever because eventually they died. But our high priest, Jesus Christ, never dies. So his high priesthood is forever, is eternal, and it cannot be passed on to others. The high priesthood of Christ cannot be passed on to others. Verse 26, such a high priest meets our need. Jesus has all the requirements that meet our predicament. He's the answer to all our problems, to all our sin. That's what it says. He's holy, blameless, pure, and apart from sinners. Apart from sin means separated from sinners. Jesus was like us in every, he was tempted like us in every respect, but he did not sin. He's holy, blameless, pure, and he was separated from sinners. Now, none of the Levitical priests were holy, blameless, pure, none of them. So this again emphasizes the uniqueness of Christ and his superiority. The order, the priestly order of Melchizedek is superior and better than the priestly order of the Levites. There's nothing. The priests, when they officiated, the Levitical priests, when they officiated the temple, they first offered sacrifices to atone for their sins, and then they offered sacrifices to make an atonement for the sins of the people whom they represented. Christ never offered a sacrifice for sin because he was sinless. This is a another important point to bear in mind. And that's why his sacrifice is called once and for all. Look at this one, 27. And like the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. Christ's sacrifice on the cross was once for all. It was perfect and complete, does not need to be repeated. But the Levitical high priests, they offered sacrifices every day for their own sins first and then for the sins of the people. Christ never offered a sacrifice for sin because he was sinless. For the law appoints as high priests men who are weak, but the oath which came after the law appointed the Son when he has been made perfect forever. So that brings us to the end of chapter 7. So once we understand who Melchizedek was and what he represents, then we'll be able to understand this chapter. The key to understanding this chapter is to know what Melchizedek represented. He's a symbol of what? Once you answer that question, once you unlock the symbolism of Melchizedek, then it's easy to understand the entire chapter. Now notice that this epistle was written to Jewish Christians, some of whom were considering to return to Judaism because they had gotten tired of the persecution. They had been subjected to many severe persecutions, and they had gotten tired and were thinking of reverting to Judaism to escape persecution. And then this epistle was written to encourage them to remain faithful to their Christian faith. And here, the writer in every chapter tries to show the superiority of Christ to the Levitical priest, the dispensation of grace, compares it to the dispensation of the law. And his idea is this: the Old Testament had the promise, but the fulfillment of the promise is the new. The Old Testament had the shadow of reality, and the substance of that shadow was realized in the person of Jesus Christ and in his ministry. So the Old Testament gives us a picture of what is transient, of what is temporary. The New Testament gives us a picture of what is permanent. So there's no comparison between the two systems. And he's telling him, why leave the perfect for the imperfect? Why leave the better for the worse? Okay, any questions about today's study?
You're muted, Joanne.
How did he die?
Who, Melchizedek? We don't know.
You don't know.
We don't know if he died. There is no mention of his death.
Okay.
So we don't know. He is a very interesting personality, but there's nothing mentioned in the Bible about the death of Melchizedek. We don't even know if he ever died. Maybe like Enoch, he was taken to heaven. We don't know.
But it says he is priest forever. If Melchizedek is priest forever, then we have two priests forever, Jesus Christ and Melchizedek, because it says Melchizedek is priest forever. He didn't die. He was righteous. He didn't have mother and father.
The
Then
priesthood
forever.
fashioned after the order of Melchizedek is eternal. Okay, it's not Melchizedek. The priesthood after the order of Melchizedek is perfect, permanent, eternal. And Jesus is a high priest, not according to the Levitical order, but according to the order of Melchizedek. So there are two priestly orders, the Levitical order and the order of Melchizedek.
If there was an order of Melchizedek, why did God confuse the Jews to the order of the Levites? If Melchizedek was the priest, why did he? The law is perfect, Bad Valley. The Ten Commandments, the law is perfect, but people are not perfect. The law is perfect. It shows us we're sinners. There is nothing wrong with the law, but no human beings, they could not.
Yeah, but you see, the law has a different function.
Yeah, it's perfect.
The Epistle of James tells us that the law
Kills.
shows us our defects and our needs,
Yeah.
but doesn't address them. He says the law is like looking in a mirror.
Yeah,
You look in a mirror and you see a blemish on your face.
yeah.
That blemish stays until it's wiped away by soap and water. You get it? So the law tells us how awful we are, that we are transgressors.
Yeah.
But that's it. The law condemns, but grace redeems.
And in Psalm 110, verse 4, who do they think the Jews, when they read Psalm 110, verse 4, who do they think that? You said it's Jesus, but they don't believe in Jesus. Who do they think the 110, verse 4 is?
Well, they believe it's a messianic verse, but they say the Messiah hasn't come. So this will apply to the Messiah when he arrives.
Yeah.
They're waiting in vain. The Messiah has come and they missed him.
So Melchizedek was present only during Abraham's life.
Time, yeah.
Only.
Yes.
We don't see him again any other time.
No.
That one time. So is there a significance why it only for Abraham is there between like versus many other?
Well, you see, Abraham is considered to be the father of the Jewish nation. The Jews are very proud of Abraham to this day. When you meet a Jew, he says, we are the sons of Abraham. Very proud of being the sons of Abraham. And believe because they're descended from Abraham, they will eventually be saved. They'll be saved by their ethnicity, not by their faith. That's the problem with the Jews of today. Ethnicity does not save you. You can be proud of your ethnic origin, but your ethnicity does not save you. Jesus is the only savior. Unless you put your faith and trust in Jesus, you can't be saved. Now, in Genesis, yes, Melchizedek lived during the time of Abraham. And I believe the reason the Epistle to Hebrews brings this up to show that the